It's been said, when it's love at first sight, run the other way. Neil Strauss. Hi, my name is Jacob Adams. I'm a fitness and leadership coach. I help people just like you get to the next level. Have you struggled in your romantic relationship in the past or lately, trying to get a sense of harmony, teamwork, be on the legendary same page? As simple as that is or sounds, it's sometimes difficult to get on the same page with somebody, right? I know that's been difficult for me in the past. For example, one time, years ago, my girlfriend at the time, we were sitting outside Starbucks and I went in to get a cup of coffee. And for both of us, and I got iced coffee for her. I was preparing it with some creamer and some raw sugar. And, there I was mixing. And she comes in and she said, and I looked to the side, I'm like, what's going on? I told you I'd be right back. And she goes, I came to see if you were talking to a bitch. And I started laughing, really, to be quite. It was so far from what I was doing. Like, even my mindset, I was just really zoned in on just making the coffee. I'm sure you may have been there in one of those moments where, like, wait a minute, that's not even the truth at all. Like, not even today, not even yesterday. Where's this insecurity or jealousy coming from? And or this overprotectiveness, whatever it was. I found it comical at the time. And she goes, yeah, maybe today you're stirring coffee, but one day it'll be the bitch. It was extremely funny, and I laughed a lot at that moment. But as time went on, I started seeing that this jealousy of sorts, or these later became power struggles. It wasn't enough that one of us was jealous. It became a game of maybe I could get the other person jealous and stuff like that. And maybe I don't have to return this person's text so readily, or maybe I'll wait half a day to return this person's text because they waited half a day. And it became a power struggle of sorts. Definitely nobody was on the same page. And sometimes when what I saw in my own life is that nothing was working. There was no alignment with values. Nobody was supporting each other's dream fully. I wanted to build my Advocare business and my fitness empire, and she wanted to to keep her private to a degree. She wanted to have her own dreams. And while we both verbally said we support each other, we weren't in complete full alignment to really see that through. We weren't on that same page. And so this continued, these power struggles, this not texting each other for half a day, or breaking up for something like, oh yeah, well you said that, well, it's over. And then getting back, these cycles, these toxic cycles of relationships. Well, my grandma doesn't think that we belong together, and my this or that. Whatever it was, there was definitely no sense of harmony in that relationship for any prolonged period of time, maybe 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and then boom. So it was almost like a systematic chaos of sorts. The harmony was that I could consistently count on chaos. And so I started feeling depressed. I started feeling like there was no solution, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how loyal I was to this person, no matter what I did on the surface, on external, or to give or to share, no matter how much I poured into that relationship, I couldn't seem to make it work. And in the past, I had relationships where I tried very little, to kind of just showed up and things worked a little better. So I was really frustrated with this. Like, here I was doing my best to make something work, and it wasn't working. Like sacrificing ego, pouring resources, time, looking into counseling, psychology books, and nothing was working. The intimacy, that was sort of sometimes the best part, but was there an alignment? No, there wasn't. And again, in the past, there was relationships that had a little bit more alignment, but maybe I wasn't really ready to commit. I felt like I still wanted to explore the world, play the field, get to know more people. And so while I was committed on the surface by words, really my heart was far from that place of commitment. So I let those relationships go. And so I began to, in 2012, I really took a hard look inward. Around 2012, 2014, I really started exploring what could be going on. And what I found was that there was a sense of growing up that needed to happen within me. A sort of manning up, adulting, being true to the higher consciousness, the higher self, being less immature, less about validation, less about trying to feel cool and always go to the next relationship, the next thing, the next fun thing. I had to let that go and put that aside. I found that. And these two polar opposites of the quick fix, the sizzle in the pan, the romantic stuff, the highs and lows, the romance, I had to say, like, this wasn't, in the end, the best thing for me. As fun as it could appear on the surface at first, as I found that it really wasn't going to work long term. And I had to start looking inward to see what I could find about myself. I was willing, because of all of my heartbreak that was pretty extensive through these 3 relationships, I had to start looking inward and see what I could find about my heart, about my psychology, about myself. And what I found was interesting. In some of the work by Neil Strauss, in his book, The Truth, he says it's called The Truth, an uncomfortable book about relationships. And it's got 2 puzzles right here. 2 pieces of a puzzle. Let's just say that's one piece, and this is the other piece, you and your romantic partner. And at the beginning of this video, I quoted Neil Strauss when I said, when it's love at first sight, run the other way. And he goes on to explain how, because of what's happened is the childhood wounds in you and the childhood wounds in your partner have enmeshed and matched so complementary that they're both trying to be attracted, almost like to a moth to a flame. They're attracted to the fire that once burned them. And it's very deep right there. Like, that's extremely deep to even start understanding that, at least for me. Okay? So what I did was, from 2014, when I started really finding that and going into meditation, dismantling the ego, going into a deep dive as to how my brain works and like my childhood issues, the troubles and the tensions and you could say the past and the angers I had towards my dad, for example, from the past and all that stuff. When I went deep dive into all of those inner issues, I started seeing that there was a sense of liberation that needed to be made within me, first and foremost, before I could start loving someone else. And so at the beginning of 2015, I started out a journey into being single, something that I hadn't done in over a decade. When one relationship ended, I would quickly want to fill that void, fill that gap, fill that need, fill that want of entertainment, of intimacy, of communication, of friendship, of fun with another person. And in 2012, I saw like that would later turn into a relationship, and then it would start crumbling down because there wasn't a purity of sorts within me when the relationship, the origin didn't start from a sense of pure love. It started from a sense of egotistic need, of needing validation, of needing some sort of like romance to fulfill to not feel the pain I had inside from my childhood wounds, from my past. Now, as I say this to you, I understand that you might hear that and think I'm crazy. And then there are some people that could hear what I'm saying, and they could hear like a guy that's being very sincere here, that has an experience of sorts as to the ups and downs, relationships, and how this matrix of sorts works, of romance, love, pure love, commitment, harmony, being on the same page. Like, there's like a matrix to this that isn't just love, or how, in the famous words of Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? And so one of the things I found was that I was acting a lot like what Neil Strauss said is an adaptive adolescent. Someone that has walls, doesn't need anyone, is addicted to intensity. And I would sometimes be attracted romantically to a wounded child type psychology. And a wounded child was more needy and fearing abandonment. And I was more romantically drawn to this. It was almost like the white knight, like trying to save somebody from their own sadness of sorts in a romance and soothe it with intimacy. And this is some really deep stuff, okay? I'm just sharing this. And in the end, if you really look at it, this was a neediness of sort, because there was a validation going on for the white knight, and there was a validation of sorts going on for the inner wounds of the other person, which was, hey, you know, I am cared for, I am needed. And so there was this addiction of sorts into this relationship, this codependency. This isn't to say that relationships aren't bad. Specifically, though, those in romance is what I found, that there is a need to get away from the addiction of needing that person romantically, because that's where the power struggles start being very resonant and very easy to identify. Because if we need somebody to live, if you're needed, if they need you to live, if they're not dependent on themselves, then it becomes an addiction. And that's the biggest thing that we're seeing in modern psychology, is that people are getting away from the idea that that's healthy, or that it should be celebrated to be so needy. Prior to 2014, for sure, that was like the thing, you know, just, you know, that song by Zed where it's like with Foxy, with foxes, and just like, you know, Clarity, where she talks about like, you are the, you know, basically like, I can't even remember the lyrics. It's by Foxes and it's by Zed, where she goes into, you are the piece of me that basically I wish I didn't need, something like that. That was prior to 2014. And now we're seeing that this addiction, this neediness to live, isn't healthy, especially long term. That's when we start seeing this dismantling of relationship, that it's hard to commit when there's so many power struggles at play, and wounds and pulling and pushing, and the friction just becomes too hot. So what I found is that often people want to feel secure in a relationship. And that's an important thing to establish of sorts, especially in a committed relationship. That's one of the reasons there is power struggles, okay? Get counseling before you need it. That's a big concept in relationships, where, in other words, if you are in a committed relationship, talk about counseling and stuff before you need it. So you can start way before you need it. You can get into discussing inner needs and thoughts and sort of insecurities before you becomes like a festering wound and problem. Establish boundaries in relationships. Meaning, decide when and where you're willing to have intimacy or sex before it happens. You don't want to just stumble upon it and then it's like now you're physically and emotionally bonded to a person, and you may not even like them over a piece of chicken. You may not even want to have a chicken taco with them, but you've already shared their body. That's a big dissonance there. So have boundaries as to what you want to do, especially if you're going to go into a committed or growing relationship. Do you know your baggage and triggers? You know, one of my triggers is being intentionally disrespected or intentionally being treated like crap. Like that's like a thing where that really triggers me. And so if somebody does or pushes those buttons, to me, those are grounds for potentially ending that relationship, because that person is intentionally trying to get at me to a degree. That's my thing. If it's not spiritual, monogamy becomes harder to maintain. This is a theory that I have. Ego is a bitch. In other words, if it's not based in spirituality, it's very difficult to maintain a healthy relationship, because Commitment tends to need a complete person because it's a person over the long term, over their growth. And there's not some element of spiritualness there where it helps people expand and express their full, total self. Then as they grow into the next level of their self, then, you may have friction with them. So their spirituality is often needed for commitment. You can be right in a relationship, or you can be right, or you can be in a relationship. You can't have both. All this means is that power struggles are common, but ultimately you have to decide, pick your battles to the extent where sometimes you have to be the one that texts the other person first, even though you feel like it's not right or it's not fair. Sometimes there's a sense of give it to them, sort of like, because it helps the relationship continue, and that's more important. And sometimes it's not all about being right. It's about staying in a relationship and keeping harmony. The worst thing a person could do in understanding these concepts is to think that they're above it, or like their ego, they have no ego, or they don't have any wounds, or like they don't have any baggage. I like to say that there are two types of people that are dangerous: someone with a lot of baggage, and somebody that has a lot of some baggage but thinks they have none. In other words, if somebody has a lot of baggage and they are aware of it, well, they have baggage and they're aware of it. At least they have a fighting chance to get through it and help you talk to them. But if somebody thinks they don't have any baggage and they have some, well, that person is going to start projecting and spewing onto you and make everything your fault. So the worst thing you do is think that this conversation doesn't include you. That's probably the worst thing you could do. You have to be aware of your own bag of shit, as Neil Strauss talks about, or your own issues, and then work through them as you become better. He says, a toxic relationship is when two fucked up people keep getting more fucked up. A healthy relationship is when two fucked up people get healthier together. This is Jacob Adams. I'd love for you to comment, talk about your sticking points, ideas, share. Kept this right at the marker. We'll see you next time.